Uh-oh.
Back in the lab, as always, brought to you by 3 Monkey Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedal boards. RCAs, check them out, 1/4 inches and DCs. Best sounding stuff, easy to put together. So we're going to continue on with the Marshmello build of the one amplifier. So the board has obviously been completed, so we got that done, right? So here's our board, and leads are all paid out, and we've also stripped off the ends of the ones that we're going to be attaching, which are all of them, and get that ready to go into the chassis. So here we have a chassis, and this is kind of like a typical Plexi era chassis. It is steel, obviously galvanized, heavy duty. I mean, good piece of solid metal right here. And then we have right now panels too. Right, so we have our front panel, which is pretty much stock. All right, we don't have to talk too much about that. And then we have the rear panel. And on the rear panel, you can see that it's, pretty much stock to a Plexi, except it has a couple of additional things on there. It has a little thing right here saying bedroom for the bedroom switch, and then the line out for the connection that you're going to use when you set this up as your master head, right? Because this is what it's sort of designed to be, is your master head going into your impulse response or your rack into a power amp, that sort of deal. Internally loaded already. No need to connect to the speakers, although you can connect to speakers. You're mostly going to be, in my opinion, the way I run it, the way I think it, the way I designed it was to use the line out. So we have to add, as you can see, some holes. 1, 2, 3, 4 holes to the back of the amplifier, to the back of the chassis, to accommodate for those controls. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the chassis and we're going to move it aside, and then we're going to take our panel right here and we're going to drill. So we've got little X's, right, which show us where the controls go. So we're going to take our drill. We're going to get a battery for the drill, and we're going to make some happy little holes just right here. Happy hole. Another happy little hole right here. We're going to add another happy hole, and the final one. Okay, so now we have our guide hole, so to speak, for what we want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the chassis and we're going to set it down on the table, and we're going to grab a couple of things, which I probably should have had ready already. So I gotta grab something so that we make sure that everything lines up nice. Sorry for the delay. There's always something you neglect to deal with when you're setting up. So what I like to do is put in a couple of things into holes that are already present. So make sure that everything lines up nice and correct. when we're actually going to assemble this, right? So we're going to take a fuse holder, we're going to put it on the end here, and then I'm going to take a jack. All right, I'm going to take one of these jacks here, and I'm going to insert it here. And that will pretty much guarantee that the holes that we drill through the chassis are going to be in a good place. So now I'm going to square up the end here to make sure it sits nice and flush with the bottom so that the panel isn't, you know, sticking up in the air, because there is a little play with panels, which is good, which you need. And then I'm going to take some tape, some masking tape, and I'm going to, there we go, secure it here. I'm going to secure this one, secure it over here. Right, and I do these little fold overs so that when it comes time to take off the tape, I've got a little sort of tab that I can pull on to get the tape off easy. So there's not a lot of scratching it with your finger to get the tape to release. So I just put a little fold like that on there. I'm going to pull out the fuse holder, and I'm going to tape it in here as well. So that is nice and steady now. So nothing's going anywhere. So I'm going to reserve the fuse holder back to its home in the baggie so it doesn't get lost. And now I'm going to do some drilling, pilot drilling, okay? So we're going to come sort of through the hole here. And I'm not going to go all the way through. I'm just going to kind of, with the hand drill, it's really just a marking. Sort of getting a little bit of a place for the bit to kind of grab onto and center upon. Right, because I'm going to actually do this on the drill press in the machine area. Okay, so there we go. So we have our holes, pilot holes ready. I'm going to vacuum up our little bits. Good. All right, so now I can take the panel off from the chassis. And you can see it just kind of peels right up, right? Very easy to do. And then when I want to put it back on again, I have my tape ready to go. So I'll put the panel aside for later. And now you can see we've got, in those areas, our little sort of places, our little pilots, half drilled pilots, where we can get a bigger bit and it'll center right on those, and we could drill right through on the drill press, a little cutting oil, make it nice and clean. And that's sort of the beginnings of it all. Now also we need to drill a couple of other holes inside of the amplifier. I have to find what I did with the load, right? So I put a load resistor inside the amp. And I kind of know where it goes by eye. Just about like that. I'm going to mark it with my Sharpie. There we go. And that is where I'm going to mount the load resistor. Now some of you might be saying, that's like a 50 or 100 watt load resistor. It's actually a 100, or rather a 50 watt resistor, but the way that the transformers are designed, power and output, and the way the amp is biased, it's not dissipating anywhere near that kind of wattage. The wattage is extraordinarily low. So the 50 watt load resistor, it doesn't even get warm. It's in my opinion, more than is needed, but I like the fact that it mounts nicely into the chassis, and why not overbuild, right? So I could probably have gotten away with using a little resistor, but I like the big resistor. I always think if you can overbuild a little bit, it's a good idea. So, right, so now I'm gonna grab the drill again. I'm gonna go through it. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen that hole out. So I've got a larger bit. And this is what I like to do, is I will take, first let me get the chips out. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit through that side. Okay. So that is going to do a little bit of relief on the perimeter of the hole. So now I can come through from this side. Okay. And I'm not going to have a blowout or a burr in the case of metal on the opposite side, right? You get a nice clean hole that you don't have to worry about, a bunch of deburring. Because deburring, I just don't like doing it. You got to do it, but if you can avoid it, it's more fun. Okay, so now, we have our resistor hole ready to go, resistor mounting ready to go. We have our pilots for our additional controls. And now I think I will retire to the machining area, and I'm going to go ahead and drill this chassis out for these holes. And when I return, we will continue with the build. All right, so I'll be right back. All right, so we drilled out our holes, as you can see. And the other thing that I do when I'm building the amp after I finish any machining work that has to be done on the chassis is to give it a good cleaning with some solvent to degrease everything and make sure that the metal is very clean. And I feel that helps with, grounding issues, to make sure that everything is, has a nice connection, and that your best chance for a good sounding amplifier is ruined if your grounding is terrible. So you need to make sure that your grounding schemes are correct, and that your ground points are secure, and that they have as direct a connection as low as an impedance as possible. And I don't like anything in the way of those grounds. So I'll really wipe this thing down a couple of times with a rag soaked in a solvent. And you'll see too, when you clean these metal parts that are, straight from machining or from a factory, that your cloth is going to turn black with grease and things that were, contaminants that were used during the process, because obviously machine shops are not sterile environments, or at least the ones that are making metal parts like these aren't. There's a lot of oils and grease laying around. So now it comes time to start stuffing the chassis. So I have a particular kind of order that I do everything in. And it's, you know, after a long time of doing this kind of thing, you figure out, you know, what makes more sense. Kind of like, you know, a person who builds houses might do the electrical before the sheetrock, right? Because once you sheetrock the walls, you can't really get into the walls anymore. So there's, you know, you need a little bit of a logistical approach to it. So what I'm going to start with is, obviously, I'm putting in these standoffs, and I'm using some blue Loctite to make sure that they do not come free at any point in the future unless you want them to. So you don't want your screws backing out. You don't want any of that stuff to happen. So I'm just going to be putting them into the chassis here, fixing them. Get those all in there nice. Okay, so we have our standoffs in, and that's what the board sort of sits on. So when you, obviously, when you put the board in, you know, it's going to sit right on these standoffs, and that'll secure it down. All right, so let's keep going. And now I'd like to put in the tube sockets. So I'm going to start with the octals and then sort of move down from there. So I have my octal sockets here. Obviously, we have some pink drink. Gotta have that. All right, we have our screws and nuts. Oh. Might have to get some more screws from the screw pile. So we'll dump out some screws here. That's not enough. We need some more. We'll have to go to the reserve giant bag of screws in a minute or two. All right, so here we go. So the octals orientation obviously is important. You've got a little keyway that tells you where you want them. Now you can put them in any which way you want. You know, I guess it doesn't matter, but you see, I already messed that up. It's gotta go this way. Here we go. But we're gonna do it the way that Marshall did it. Okay, so you can sort of see what we've got going on. So we're gonna get out some, should have poured some of these out too. All right, hang on. All right, so I'm gonna have to remember that the phone is on that little jig supported above my bench, and I probably shouldn't be wielding this chassis like it's a something that owes me money. All right, so let's continue. Yeah, missed it that time. All right, so we got our lock nuts, right? Nylon insert lock nuts, so I'm putting that on. And I'm putting on one of these star grounds from here, one of these rather solder tabs, to make a ground point for the octal sockets and for their cathode connection. And I like to put a 1 ohm 1 watt resistor there. I've always done that since the blockhead days. It was kind of a courtesy, I think, so that if people ever have to rebias the amp, they can do it a little easier to decipher the current that's coming through the power tubes without having to do something that's dangerous, like a transformer shunt, or something that requires a lot of specialized equipment, like a bias right or something like that. You can just do this with a multimeter. So it's sort of something I've gotten in the habit of doing and have always liked doing. Marshall used to use just a ground, a simple bus wire for that. but I'll use a 1 ohm 1 watt. So you can see how the orientation is here. Nice and secure. And then we're just going to keep going sort of down that line. So maybe for the purposes of the video, we'll do some of the things. We'll keep going. Let's just keep going for right now. I was thinking about breaking it up a little bit more, but maybe we'll put in like the octals. So maybe, you never know what happens when you're filming, right? We had the phone fall on the floor, which was a lot of fun. Last episode, I dropped the resistors all over the place after carefully sorting them for hours. Amp building is fun when you're doing it on television, doing it on the YouTubes. All right, so we're just kind of putting this together. I'll have to get a better iPhone jig to hold the phone in that position than the one I made, or just modify this one a little bit more. So if you do whack it, it might have a chance of staying in place. Just kind of adjusting where the solder tab is while because they can be a little bit of a pain in the butt in terms of spinning around. So you want to have them, I like to have them all in the same sort of position for my lead dress application. So that's good there. So we have these two. Just turn it a tiny bit more. There we go. That's good there. And that one up. And then we can continue. So I was watching some other videos the other day, last night rather, and there was a guy who I like to follow who has a lot of isolated tracks. So he'd put up an isolated track of dirty movies of the guitar parts, which again is one of the best, I think, pieces of guitar work that he's done, and how it was all put together by Ted and Don also was, I think, kind of really helped along with the music. But anyway, his thumbnail, as well as the photo that was used as like sort of what you looked at while you listened, was I think obviously from Wolfgang. And what am I doing? Wow. See? Put this in the place where there's a can. Anyway, so trying to think, talk, and do at the same time doesn't always work. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Wolfgang. So it was obviously a picture that Wolfgang had put up somewhere, probably on Instagram or somewhere like that, and it was of the SG Junior that I think was obviously had to be what was used on Dirty Movies, the exact guitar. And I don't think I've ever seen that photo before, so it was really cool. So it was a white SG Junior that had the lower horn chopped off, right? Which is what Eddie said he did to get get access to the upper regions of the fretboard with his slide. Now the SG was kind of modified too. It had, obviously the pickguard was removed. And and it used what looked like something like I'm just going off of memory right now because I'm just thinking of it. I don't really know if this is right, but something close to like a Leo Kwan badass bridge to replace the stop tail sort of bridge that the SG Juniors used. It was white in color, which I can imagine may have been original. Maybe not. And a single P90 there. So that P90 pickup is really something. I mean, P90s in general, especially the old ones, they really have just the way you would want a Les Paul to sound, right? The only drawback, obviously, that's better, is that they are noisy, right? Since they're a single coil, they don't have any hum rejection from a dual coil sort of setup. And they pick up RF like it's their job. And they're difficult to use live. At best, they're difficult. There are, ways that you could try to cancel, that sort of RF by using a dummy coil. That doesn't affect the sound too much, but will pick up the RF in an out of phase sort of position relative to the main signal and then cancel it out. But I always feel like it doesn't quite sound the same. But anyway, in a studio, I think you can get away with using a P90 for sure. You can find the direction to which you point yourself where the RF is no longer an issue, right? Or you could do things as crazy as what Stevie Ray Vaughan was alleged to have done with Cesar Diaz, which would be to ensconce him in a chicken coop while he was playing. So he was in basically a Faraday cage while he was playing guitar. I would also assume, it's just my thinking, that if I were building a said studio, that I would probably make sure the walls were some kind of Faraday cage. Right? Because nothing would be more annoying than having pirate radio showing up when you just, when you're in the middle of recording something. That I would imagine would be pretty horrible. Actually, I have just enough screws to finish this. So now we've got our Novel or 9-pin sockets. Now here's what I like to do with these before I put them in, is I like to join pins 4 and 5 together with some bus wire. And it just, for me, these 2 pins obviously have to be connected when you're using AC filaments the way that Marshall used them. And I just feel like this is extra insurance. It makes my life a little bit easier than having to sort of thread your heater wires through there. So that's sort of what I do. And that will help us in the future, right? Do something now to make your life easier later is something I was told my entire life and never ever listened to. Because now is all there is. Later doesn't matter. But later on you realize that later does matter. So later is later. Earlier, later doesn't matter. Glad I made a mistake while we were doing this, putting stuff in the wrong places, because that's just what's going to happen when you're trying to talk. Makes for things to be interesting. Whacking the camera, smashing things. All right, so here are our 9 pins all ready to go. So I will also load the screws into them beforehand, before inserting them, because it is a giant pain in the butt if you don't. to sort of line it, to get the screws to drop in there. It's kind of like, you know, threading needles or trying to get your hand in a place like right now where the laws of nature work against you. So using these nylon sort of lock nuts, I think it's well, not only are they attractive in the build process, but they also allow you to do a repair if one should ever be needed a little bit easier. Now, I've often found in my life that when you build something to make it easy to repair, you never need to repair it. It's only when you make it difficult to repair that you're going to have to repair it. So that's what I attribute the fact that these amplifiers never need repair, is that I spend a lot of time making it easy for myself to repair them should they need repair. So therefore the laws of the universe will work to say it shall never need repair, which is good for you guys. But I just like the way I like the way this hardware performs. I've always used it from blockhead through threes. Just always used them. I like stainless nylon insert lock washes. Now you can kind of, I guess, see why I have repetitive motion injuries throughout my body, right? My hands, my elbows, my forearms, my shoulder, my neck, my back. It's all pretty much been wrecked from this activity. But that's what happens. Is it worth it? Yeah. But I just can't do it as much as I used to be able to. So occasionally I'll have to take a day off or two to let, you know, a pinched nerve in my neck or my shoulder to come to sort of relieve itself, or, you know, got ulnar nerve issues. That will make it very difficult for me to use my hand from overuse. So some days, you know, sometimes things take longer because I just simply can't do it. Nice. Okay, so now after I do these sockets, right, then I like to do the cans. So I'm going to get the can clamps. Where are my can clamps? Here they are. Right, so these are the clamps that will hold the filter cans. Which are these guys, right? In place. So to start it all off, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to load cans into the clamps. And then I'll be putting them on the chassis. So here's the related hardware for the cans, clamps. And here's some can capacitors. So we'll just start loading them up. You don't got to get them much more than finger tight right now. So you're going to want to be able to spin them and then make sure that the terminals are oriented in a way that you want for proper lead dress and to make things nice and neat. So right now we're just kind of finger tightening things. All right, so we got these two. Get some more cans. We should have 4 more. I like to put the screw side where the attachment point is so that you can get a screw in there to attach it to the chassis. If you go the other way, oftentimes the nut in the end of the screw that you're putting in right now will interfere with the attachment to the chassis. So we're just going to continue loading these things up. There it is. It was hiding from me. It's getting a little cross-threaded here. There we go. There was just a little something in the threads there that was making it difficult to finger tighten. So we're also going to use some of these flat washers. I'll just put a little pile of them here to help secure those cans in place. I am going to need to go and get the bag of getting some more number 4 by 40 screws. So let me pause this and then we'll return. Some more screws so we can continue on. Looks like we could probably do about 10 more minutes or so for this video, and then I think it's going to be at the hour mark. So to begin, all right, so we're going to take our screws and our washer, flat washer, all right, which will help with the sizing. Over. Oh, we didn't hit the camera. That's good. So I'm trying to center the can, obviously, in its opening while I'm tightening down these screws. And once I got them both tightened down, at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the can into the position I want, which is just about like that, with the ground pointed that way, the ground tab pointed that way. Now I could take the side screw and just secure the clamp, right, so that this doesn't move anymore. And then that one is installed. Let's make sure it's the correct value. Okay. And then we're going to put this one in the similar orientation. Now you can see though there's kind of like a little issue there of getting a screwdriver in, but it still works. turn the can around the other way and have the screw here if you wanted. I kind of like them to look all the same because I'm nuts. Oh, we didn't get out some more number 4 lock nuts. We need some more of those. So let's spill a few more out on the table. That's plenty. And now we can go ahead and continue. There we are. I hope this is getting in frame well enough, because I can't really see the screen of the phone because it's not in line with my line of sight, so to speak. Knock that over. All right, now on this one, we're actually going to need to put one of those. That was somebody telling me something. We're going to need to put a solder tab in. All right. So that was a fortunate, happy little accident. Happy little accident. Tighten that down a little bit more. Okay, so now we'll twist the can to get it how we want it, which is about like that. So you can see the ground tab right there, which we're actually going to try to spin a little bit more. There we go. There we are. That's nice. Now we can go ahead and tighten down the clamp. Right. And we can come from the other side. We get the appropriate, like so. Tighten that down nice. There we go. Gotta move quickly. All right, so now we're gonna add some more can clamps. Now for this one, you can see it doesn't quite work that way, right? So in this one, we flip it around to allow us to position our capacitors. Yep, there we go. You know what I did not do, which I still have to do, and there's plenty of time to do it, is I have to drill two more 1/8" holes into the chassis to receive a ground point. One for the main chassis ground, and the other one for the filament ground. Now, I like a particular way of grounding my chassis. I'm orientating the capacitor right now. Hang on a second. That looks good right there, so I can go ahead and tighten it down. I like to do my ground system 90% of the way that Marshall did it. Well, they changed so much over the years, it's really hard to know, hard to say definitively that they had a methodology. But I like to make my ground for my chassis the most important ground, right? That would come from your IEC power inlet to the chassis to make that the most important ground. So I use a dedicated screw for that, and it sits aside from anything else. It's not attached to a capacitor or to something else. And the lead that's going to it for the ground connection will be a little long. So if God forbid, and I don't see, it never happens, but if the cord is pulled away from the chassis and it tears the IEC connector out of the chassis, which to my mind would be impossible considering how it's affixed to the chassis and how the power cord is just plugged in. But should that happen, that the last thing to break free from the chassis would be that ground, the chassis ground, because it's very important to have that in operation 100% of the time. That is, as they say, key. So I could just go ahead and mark, once I'm done putting in these clamps, I could just mark those locations and then give it a quick drill with the 1/8 inch. That's good. All right. Now we'll turn this capacitor so that it is where we want it, which is the ground. I might tighten that a little bit too much when I was originally finger tightening it. Give it a little loose. My hands seem to be a little, there we go. Or a little slippery. There we go. All right, so now I can tighten down these clamps. All right, let me grab the nut wrench, the nut driver in there. There we go. All right, closing in, and in pretty good time too. Hopefully we can get it done and get us out of here before disaster strikes. So this is going that way. This music is only adding to the sense of urgency I feel in my brain. Just centering it a little better. There we go. Then we'll spin the cap to get it how we want it. There we go. Now we'll go ahead and tighten, clamp down. And we have one more to do. And then we are good. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. Just like so. Nuts. uncooperative. You need some good dexterity for all of this. Sometimes you get yourself in a bit of a pickle. There we go. Here we go. And we'll spin it just how we want it. Set it down. And now we can go ahead and tighten it up. Here we are. Okay, so we've done a lot of the work getting our chassis together. We still have to obviously put in the transformers. Those go in last, right? So, you know what? I think that's probably long enough for today, for this video. So we'll keep going on the build and get this thing done, right? Which will be a lot of fun. So we got to put in our resistor. We got to put in our transformer. Then we can start actually wiring the amplifier itself. So that should be fun to watch as well. All right, so once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.